Hey everybody, I wanted to talk to you today about one of my favorite types of yarns to spin, a single ply gradient yarn. And what I mean by that is spinning a yarn that is a single ply. So I'm not going to go in, the finished yarn is going to be single ply. I'm not going to two ply it together. I'm not going to ply it with something else. I'm not going to thread ply it. It's just going to be a even single ply of yarn because I love how it looks. To me, if I'm going to use hand spun, I want it to look like hand spun. If I wanted it to look like perfect non-hand spun, then I would buy one of the mini fabulous, mill spun yarns that are out there. So for me personally, I've always felt like if you're gonna use like in your knitting, you're gonna knit with hand spun yarn or crochet with hand spun yarn, let it have a little bit of that texture. So that's my feelings on single ply, but there are a few tips that I would like to go over with single ply yarn. So since I'm shooting for not just single ply yarn, but gradient color single ply yarn, let me tell you what that means. Basically, I mean your final yarn is going to end up where it starts out as one color. So in this case, on one side of the yarn is going to be this cream color, and then it's going to slowly progress to this light green color all the way down to this deep kind of emerald green color. So the yarn itself, if we're thinking about that, if we're knitting, so let's imagine I'm knitting a hat. So that would mean, because I love knitting hats, and this type of yarn lends itself very well to hats. So let's imagine I'm making a beanie hat. The brim of the beanie hat would start out as I started knitting it, because if I spin it and it goes from end to end, this color to this color, then as I'm knitting it, it's also going to go from this color to this color. Whereas if we two-plied it or mixed all these color sections up, then my hat's going to end up being, and it would still be really pretty, I like it that way too, my hat would end up being all of these different colors all kind of mixed in together, which I have a lot of hats that way, and they're great, and I love that. An alternative would be if you did a gradient spun yarn, then your hat is slowly going to change color from one color to the other color as you are making the hat. And then you could even do, like, you could save part of the yarn to make like a pom-pom for the hat. So you could have one where like the brim maybe started out this color and then slowly got lighter as you knitted upwards, and then you could have saved a little bit of your dark green yarn to do like a fun pom-pom on the back. So I think it just kind of gives you a lot of creativity within one braid of yarn. And I think about, not braid of yarn, one braid of fiber. As someone who curates fiber art subscriptions, I spend a lot of my time thinking about fiber braids. And so I try to mix it up from month to month, from my marbled braids where, imagine it, they all just kind of look like this with the colors all mixed together, to more of a color blocked braids, which this is not a great example of. Color blocked being like maybe you had red, white, and blue. That would be a color blocked braid. And then these are sort of a hybrid we like to do sometimes where it's kind of a fade. So I put a lot of thought into the fiber braid subscriptions that I have on my website for different spinning techniques, and I love that they all kind of lend themselves differently to different yarns and different projects. So for this type of braid, what I wanted to do was this gradient spun yarn. So of course, as you would imagine, the first step of making a gradient colored yarn would be, first off, and you'll see, I wanted to show that it doesn't have to be, oh look, that one actually came right apart. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect as far as how you section this off, because obviously even in this lighter section there's still colors. What I would do with this, and depending on how picky you would want to get, is you can kind of see okay, so this is where it starts getting really dark here. I would pull this one apart here. So I've got one section I would then roll up, and this would be my darkest section right here. And then, here, I'm going to toss this over on the counter. And then for this section, it is but you can see it starts getting just the undertones in it. You've still got a lot of this like crisp, creamy color here. And then kind of here, it starts getting a little bit more sea foamy. So I would then maybe make a second break here for my kind of not really dark, but kind of sea foamy section. And then within this section, you could either spin this as your light section and it would just be kind of marbled, or if you really wanted to, you could go through and divide this way and then kind of section it off a little bit more in smaller sections if you wanted to, but honestly I wouldn't, and that's what I didn't on the yarn you will see for this project. So then this is my lighter section. So how I would spin this, it's exactly how you just saw me divide it, but like reverse engineered. I would start out with the lighter section and divide it out, and I would spin all of this section, all of the seafoam section, and then all of the dark green section in that order, so that then that's how the final yarn would look. So how would I divide this yarn, you ask, for an even single? Well, what I usually teach is I like to divide it, here I'm just going to prop it on my shoulder. I like to divide my fiber about the size, because I'm a big fan of pre-drafting, especially for even yarns and newer spinners, which we're going to assume we're talking to here. I always tell people to kind of divide it about the size of your pinky finger. You put it here. So you could leave it this size, or if you really wanted to pre-draft, you could pull it down to about the size of your pinky finger. And then when I talk about pre-drafting, what that usually means is you're going to go through and kind of loosen up the fiber. Now, you don't want to pull the fiber all the way apart, obviously, but we're going to loosen it up. And we'll put this one on this shoulder. I don't care if the shoulder using is optional. That's just for me filming this video. But so you're going to go through, and within your color blocks, we're going to strip it out to about the size of our pinky and then pre-draft it a little bit. You can tell I have parrots. I'm used to having, and my dog, everything wants to sit on my shoulders. So I'm going to go through, pull out, loosen. And so you would do this for, like I said, this whole section of your lighter section. So you're going to go through and do that first. The reason that I tell you to pull it into sections and then pre-draft it is one of the most common questions people want to know, and especially if your end goal is a single ply yarn, is how do I keep it from getting so twisty? Slowing down your feet, having a large enough gear that it's not like too twisty, and then pre-drafting your fiber is going to tremendously help with not having twisty looking yarn, because yarn gets twisty, single ply yarn gets twisty when you're kind of holding on to it in the drafting process longer than you need to. So like the flyer head is spinning, putting twist into the yarn, and then you're still kind of messing with it. So it's not, you got to let the flyer head take the yarn onto the bobbin a little quicker. So that's where going up a size in gears or slowing down your feet, which is my #1 problem, helps. And also pre-drafting lets you get it right a little quicker so that you're able to get it to the size that you want and let it go on your wheel a little easier. And you're not like fighting with it at the orifice, if that helps. So that's why we're going to pre-draft it. And that is my main advice for how not to have a twisty outcome on your single ply yarn. Now I know what you're thinking. Inevitably, I don't know. I'm not going to say nobody, because maybe there's somebody out there. Everyone I have ever encountered, especially including me, your single ply yarn is going to end up just a little bit twisty. It just is. I've never had small sections of it not be a little bit twisty, and I think that's okay. And that is one thing if you are two-plying it, because you spin in one direction and then you ply in the other direction, just kind of the nature of the maneuver there kind of relaxes a little bit of that twist, because if you're twisting it, spinning it this way, and then you're kind of respinning it the other way, you're kind of folding it back. So two-plying definitely is the #1 way to have less twisty looking yarn, but we're trying to have one of those cool singles, one for the cool texture, and two to get a lot of yardage out of that one braid so you make your cool hat we were talking about. So first off, you need to accept that it's going to be a little bit twisty, and that's okay. And second, you could use a nitty knotty. A nitty knotty is my #1 way, and I'm sure there's lots of other ways, but what my mom and I do is we get a nitty knotty, and it needs to be one that you are not precious about, not your grandma's nitty knotty, but just a good old workhorse plastic or wooden nitty knotty. You're going to wrap the yarn, the single ply yarn, onto the nitty knotty. I wet mine. Mom does too. We run it under cool water in the sink. Obviously, don't, don't do anything crazy to it. Just run it under some cool water and then just let it dry. We set it and just let it dry, generally 24 hours overnight, and magical things will happen. Something about wetting it and letting it dry stretched out. Will there still be a little bit of twist in there here and there? Sure. But for the most part, especially if you did your pre-drafting and you didn't spin it too twisty to start with, and then you wet set it and let it dry for 20, like overnight, you would be amazed. I have messed myself up so many times trying to rush to get yarn off and been like, it doesn't look twisty. It looks fine. Gotten it on the nitty knotty and kind of, pulled through it and been like, it's fine. It's fine. I'm sure it's good. And taking it off the nitty knotty, which don't ever do that. Once you take it off the nitty knotty, there is no like pulling it to get it back on the nitty knotty. It's off. So don't take it off the nitty knotty till you're done. I've made that mistake, and then I'm always like, ugh, why did I do that? So go ahead and take the time. Please wet the yarn, let it dry overnight, and you will be amazed how much more chill that yarn will be. So that is definitely important for single ply yarn. Don't be like me and rush it. And the other thing is just it's gonna be okay. Heidi and I, she does a lot of crocheting, I do a lot of knitting, and we both love Heidi of Cocoon Homespun, if you're wondering, so shout out Heidi. We worked a Vogue, I was a guest star at her Vogue knitting booth a few years ago, and so we were both sitting there working, and we both love single ply yarn, and we both sold a lot of single ply yarn, hand spun at this event. So as we were working on it, people would ask us about like, oh, is that hard to work with? And both of us, like I said, as a knitter and a crocheter, could very easily be like, no, it's really not. Like, as you're working with it, even if there's a little twisty section, like I said, we've proven it with both knitting and crochet in the process of doing it, as long as it's not so twisty that like you can't work with it, which it's not going to be. If I don't know anybody who's working with yarn that twisty, the process of knitting is going to kind of pull those little twisty sparks, kind of relax them or unroll them a little bit. So honestly, I wouldn't let it keep me awake at night. Just set it on a nitty knotty, roll it into a ball or a cake or however you're doing that, and then work on your project. And as you are working on it, it will come out, and you're going to block it again. So we're imagining this hat. We're going to block it again as a hat. And so, it's going to be processed and worked out. And so you'll have beautiful yarn, and there's no need to drive yourself nuts about it. So I hope that inspires you to have some fun with a single ply yarn, which will give you I guess about the maximum yardage and usability. I like to shoot for like a worsted weight out of a 4-ounce braid. So if you would like more information on the braids I was talking about, they are on my website, either in the leftover braid listing, or just sign up for one of the Fiber Arts subscriptions. And the subscriptions, 2 of those involve those braids. And so that's how you can find out information on that. They're all USA small farm supporting and small artist supporting. And, obviously I appreciate it. And I would love to see what you make out of that. So please come on over to Facebook in my, my Facebook group, and you can find me there. And I would love to see your projects.